The first thing I felt was someone trembling beside me. The second was her hand gripping my shirt so tightly that her fingers had gone pale. I opened my eyes at midnight and saw my neighbor, Brielle, lying beside me, tears silently running down her face as she whispered the words that would change everything between us: "Don't leave me alone." She was sleepwalking. She had somehow crossed from her house into mine, but what terrified me wasn't that she had come to my room. It was the look on her face, as if somewhere inside a dream, she was desperately trying to escape a life she had been carrying alone for far too long. If you believe that kindness can save someone, that forgiveness can heal wounds, and that hope and second chances can find us when we least expect them, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you can be part of our community and our family of heartfelt stories. My name is Everett Hale, and before that night, I barely knew Brielle Mercer beyond the polite greetings we exchanged whenever we happened to meet outside our neighboring houses. She lived in the small blue house beside mine, a place with white shutters, a carefully trimmed garden, and a porch where she often sat alone during the afternoon with a book open on her lap. She was the kind of person who smiled at people without ever letting them get close enough to ask whether she was okay. I had moved into the neighborhood a little over a year earlier after taking a job at a local restoration workshop, and I quickly became known as the quiet man who fixed old furniture and spent most mornings repairing things that other people had given up on. Brielle seemed to understand that about me. She once told me that broken things deserved patience, and I remember thinking that she had said it with far more sadness than the words required. The morning after that strange midnight visit, I expected everything to be awkward. Instead, Brielle arrived at my front door just after breakfast looking completely confused. She had no memory of coming into my house. When I carefully explained what had happened, the color drained from her face. She stood on my porch staring at the floor, embarrassed and frightened, repeatedly apologizing as though she had committed some terrible offense. I told her there was nothing to apologize for, but she couldn't stop looking toward the hallway. Eventually she admitted that the sleepwalking had happened before, though never quite like this. She had been under enormous stress for several months, and sometimes she woke up in places she couldn't remember reaching. Once, she had found herself sitting on her kitchen floor holding a suitcase. Another time, she had discovered the front door wide open in the morning. She had always laughed it off, but now she could no longer pretend it was harmless. That afternoon, while I was repairing an old wooden cabinet in my workshop, Brielle came over carrying 2 cups of coffee. She placed one beside me and sat quietly on the stool near the window. For the first time, she didn't seem interested in pretending. She told me that her younger sister, Celeste, had died nearly 2 years earlier after a long illness, and Brielle had spent most of that time caring for her. Their parents had lived several states away, and Brielle had convinced herself that she could handle everything alone. She became the person who arranged appointments, managed medications, cooked meals, paid bills, and stayed awake whenever Celeste was afraid. After Celeste died, everyone told Brielle she was strong. That word had become a prison. She explained that she had never really grieved because she believed there were still people who needed her. When the house became quiet, the memories became louder. She would remember Celeste calling her name from another room. She would instinctively reach for her phone to tell her something funny. She would walk into the kitchen and expect to see her sister sitting there. Then reality would return, and the emptiness would hit her all over again. The sleepwalking had started around that time. She didn't know why, but her body seemed to keep searching for the person she had lost. I listened without trying to fix her. That was something I had learned the hard way after my own father died. People often think grief needs advice, when sometimes it only needs someone willing to sit beside it without running away. Brielle eventually told me that the words she had whispered to me that night were not really meant for me. In her dream, she believed she was calling for Celeste. She had been terrified of being left alone again. That confession changed the way I saw her. The woman I had thought was simply reserved was actually exhausted from years of being afraid that everyone she loved would eventually disappear. I told her she didn't have to be ashamed of what happened. I told her that needing someone did not make her weak. She looked at me for a long time, then quietly admitted that nobody had said that to her since Celeste died. Over the next few weeks, our friendship grew in small, ordinary ways. We started having breakfast together on certain mornings. She would bring fresh bread from the bakery, and I would make coffee. Sometimes we talked about serious things, and sometimes we argued about ridiculous things like whether old movies were actually better than new ones. She began helping me restore furniture at the workshop, although she had absolutely no patience for sanding. I teased her about it, and for the first time I heard her laugh without immediately covering it with an apology. But healing rarely moves in a straight line. One morning, Brielle received a phone call that changed her expression instantly. Her father, Graham, had decided to sell the family home where she and Celeste had grown up. He wanted Brielle to come back and clear out her sister's belongings before the house was sold. She hadn't stepped inside that house since the funeral. She told me she couldn't do it. She said there were too many memories there. I encouraged her to go only if she felt ready, but she insisted she wasn't ready and never would be. Then something unexpected happened. Her father arrived at my workshop that afternoon. I had never met him before. He was a stern-looking man with tired eyes, and he clearly wasn't comfortable asking a stranger for help. He explained that Brielle had stopped answering his calls because she blamed him for being absent during Celeste's illness. He admitted that he had buried himself in work because he didn't know how to watch his daughter suffer. He had believed sending money and arranging medical support was the same as being present. It wasn't. He knew that now. The most painful part was that he wanted forgiveness but didn't know how to ask for it without making the conversation about his own guilt. I told him that if he wanted to repair his relationship with Brielle, he needed to stop defending himself and start listening to what she had needed from him. The following Saturday, Brielle finally agreed to visit the old family house. I went with her, but I stayed outside until she asked me to come in. The house smelled exactly as she remembered. Dust floated through the afternoon sunlight, and every room seemed to hold a piece of her childhood. In Celeste's bedroom, Brielle froze. There were photographs everywhere. 2 sisters on bicycles. 2 girls laughing beside a Christmas tree. Celeste wearing an oversized coat. Brielle pretending to be annoyed while her sister hugged her from behind. Then she found a small wooden box beneath the bed. Inside were dozens of folded notes. They had been written by Celeste. Some were silly reminders. Some were jokes. Some were memories. But one note was different. Brielle unfolded it with shaking hands, and after reading it, she couldn't move. Celeste had written that she knew Brielle was exhausted. She knew her sister was sacrificing everything to take care of her. She wrote that if there ever came a day when she was gone, Brielle must not turn her entire life into a monument to her death. She wanted Brielle to travel, laugh, make friends, fall in love, make mistakes, and build a life that didn't require permission from grief. Brielle broke down. Not the quiet tears I had seen before, but the kind of crying that comes from holding something inside for so long that the body finally refuses to carry it anymore. I stayed beside her while she cried. Then her father walked into the room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Graham looked at his daughter and finally stopped trying to be the strong father who had all the answers. He simply admitted that he had failed her. He told her he had been terrified of losing both daughters and had responded to that fear by becoming distant. He said he had mistaken providing for loving and silence for strength. Then he apologized without asking her to forgive him. Brielle didn't forgive him immediately. And that was okay. She told him she was angry. She told him she had needed him. She told him that there were nights when she had sat beside Celeste's hospital bed wishing her father would walk through the door and tell her she didn't have to carry everything alone. Graham listened. For the first time, he didn't interrupt. That was the beginning of their healing. When we returned home that afternoon, Brielle seemed different. Not magically healed, not suddenly free of grief, but lighter. She had finally allowed herself to admit that she was angry, and somehow saying it aloud had made room for something else. Hope. Months passed. The sleepwalking became less frequent, then eventually stopped. Brielle began seeing a counselor and slowly rebuilt parts of her life she had abandoned. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since childhood. She volunteered at a community center. She visited her father more often, though their relationship remained imperfect. They were learning that forgiveness wasn't forgetting what happened. It was deciding that the pain would no longer control every tomorrow. And I changed too. For years, I had convinced myself that keeping people at a safe distance was the same thing as protecting myself. Brielle taught me otherwise. She showed me that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is admit they need someone. And sometimes the greatest act of love isn't rescuing someone from their pain. It's sitting beside them while they find their own way through it. One bright afternoon, nearly a year after that strange night, Brielle and I sat together on her porch. She had planted new flowers along the walkway, and the old blue house no longer looked like a place waiting for the past to return. It looked like a home again. She handed me a small wooden frame. Inside was a photograph of the two of us standing outside my workshop, both laughing at something I could no longer remember. On the back, she had written a simple sentence. She had once been afraid of being left alone. Now she had learned that being loved didn't mean someone had to save her from every difficult moment. It meant knowing that when life became unbearable, she didn't have to face it pretending she was fine. I looked at her, and she smiled. There was no dramatic confession, no perfect promise, and no miracle that erased everything that had happened. There was something better. Two wounded people who had learned how to stay. Brielle had once walked into my home while sleeping because some part of her was desperately searching for safety. Months later, she no longer needed to wander anywhere. She had found safety in herself, forgiveness in her family, purpose in her life, and love in the simple certainty that she was no longer alone. Before the story ends, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been strong for so long that you forgot you were allowed to need someone too? If this story touched something inside you, leave a meaningful comment and tell us what you believe the real meaning of staying is when someone is hurting. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Sometimes, the person who looks strongest is secretly the one hoping someone will simply stay. And sometimes, healing begins with nothing more complicated than hearing the words we were too afraid to ask for, "You don't have to face this alone."